What is hegemony? Antonio Gramsci and the Prison Notebooks. I'm D. Elizabeth Glasgow, and I'm your lecturer for this series. In his Prison Notebooks, Antonio Gramsci outlined one of the central tenets of Marxist theorizing, the notion of hegemony. For many years, Marxist theorists wanted to understand why the powerless consent to be dominated by those in positions of power. And one of the ways they came to understand it was through the concept of hegemony. While he was imprisoned for promoting and participating in subversive ideas against the government, the Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci wrote a series of pamphlets called simply the Prison Notebooks. In them, he further developed the notion of hegemony, a Greek term meaning domination. For Gramsci, the ruling class, individuals in positions of power and influence, use hegemonic ideas to gain domination over the subjugated classes. This hegemony of ideas was not accomplished through using force. It was not accomplished through using coercion. It was accomplished through getting consent from the masses of ordinary people. This consent was won through using something called common sense. In other words, Gramsci argued that the ruling classes achieved domination by manipulating language, culture, morality, and common sense. By common sense, we mean the way that individuals look to common sense to guide them in their immediate private concerns. As a result, individual commonsensical approaches, though helpful in guiding the individual through their local existence, prevents them from perceiving overarching institutional socio-economic exploitation made possible by cultural hegemony. Common sense means just the way things are, the way things have always been. In other words, it does not challenge the status quo, but embraces it as just common sense. Accordingly, individuals will not concern themselves with social and economic oppression and other areas of discontent in political, financial, and social life. Let's look at some examples of hegemonic enterprises. First, the mass media. In recent times, hegemony has become a foundational part of mass media. The media is viewed as an independent and impartial entity. However, media have to follow a set of guidelines and protocols while producing any form of news. Since the media are inherently commercial in nature, they must follow these given rules in order to do business and to survive. This causes the introduction of a bias that is favorable to the state and political system that licenses the media establishment. Therefore, a partially untrue version of events is put forth for assimilation by the public. We'll talk about this more when we do our special series on the mass media. The second example is the English language. Its impact on education is seen by the widespread use of English as the language of instruction. It has become important to be proficient in the English language if one is to excel professionally. This is reinforced by the fact that majority of the elite educational institutions provide education only in English and do not accept students who are not well versed in the language. This occurs to such an extent that the knowledge of this language has become synonymous to being educated and intelligent, and those lacking it are deemed to be uneducated and unintelligent. The most common example of hegemony can be observed in the franchising and globalization of world cuisine, which involves franchises like KFC, Starbucks, McDonald's, etc. It also includes the practice of foreign companies who produce products that will sell well in the foreign market. So let's take a deeper look at the interdependent and interrelated relationship between the economically dominant and the subordinated classes. Consent and coercive force are interrelated. Gramsci argued that although it may not seem like the ruling class is using force to maintain its dominance, nevertheless, force underwrites the appearance of consent. In other words, Gramsci argued that it is a mistake to think that the ruling class dominates the subjugated class only by consent, that force is interchangeable with consent. One does not exist without the other. there is a constant negotiation between the ruling class and the subordinated classes about what societal strivings are acceptable or not. But for the dominant class, individuals who possess all the power and all the influence in a society, the goal is always to maintain ruling class ideas, to incubate societal resources. Negotiation is not done through any altruistic concern for bringing about equal justice or a more equitable division of resources or representation. By negotiating with the subjugated classes, the ruling class seeks to contain or deflect any group or anyone who is antagonistic when it comes to making demands on the ruling class. Indeed, hegemony of the ruling class is always at risk of being destabilized. This is especially true during times of societal crises and collapse. During these times, hegemony of the ruling class is reconstituted and recomposed. It is made over so that it addresses the new situation. This kind of negotiation, of back and forth, is a dynamic process. It is not static. Also, it is not simply the case that individuals in the subordinated classes are brainwashed. Neither is it the case that the ruling class hegemony is on the verge of collapse. That is to say, it is a balancing exercise. Gramsci and others like Laclau and Mouffe revealed that hegemony is a much more nuanced process than this. Consider that workers in the same economic situation may be naturally inclined toward solidarity. In other words, when it comes to work and other activities, there is a natural bond through similar work, economic situation, and other activity. But there is also a kind of accepted notion of the ruling class ideas that runs through the subjugated class, and that is perpetuated by the mass media and other institutions of power. In this way, ruling class ideas become pervasive in a society, even though some ideas may be detrimental to the well-being of ordinary workers. So there remains a continuous tension that is sometimes evident and sometimes not. Gramsci and other Marxist theorists argued that in rare cases, because of the experiences and conditions under which subjugated classes struggle, this tension may push subjugated classes into struggle against ruling class ideas. This may bring about revolution, and with revolution, the notions of common sense that subordinated classes have been laboring under come into conflict with their everyday lived experience. At this time, a new set of ideas, politically conscious and aware, that reflect and benefit the actual lived experience of the subordinated classes may come into being. I'm D. Elizabeth Glasgow. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.